With the launch of chapters 3 and 4, I recently replayed the entirety of Deltarune. At first, I was a bit nervous going back to my favorite RPG of all time. By that point, it had been 4 years since I first fell in love with the game when chapter 2 came out, and I was worried about returning to its world after such a long absence. The game not hitting as hard now as it did then. But thankfully, that never happened. The dialogue was still just as witty, the characters just as charming. But there was one thing that changed. Me. This change came in the form of this unexpected feeling. An indescribable blend of nostalgia, melancholy, and depression. When I first played Deltarune, it was September of 2021. I had just entered 10th grade and was at possibly the biggest crossroads of my life, nearing the 100,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. A tweet from Toby Fox was posted. Deltarune Chapter 2 would be released in 2 days. While it wasn't exactly dropped without warning, it definitely threw me for a loop. Having just played Undertale a year prior, I decided to play through both chapters. I lived a very different life in 2021, but at the same time, it's hauntingly similar. Much like Chris and Susie, I was still in school, and at the time, I was actively taking it for granted. It's funny how much more mystique a place gets once you're no longer able to go back. At the time, I couldn't really care less. I saw the classroom as an endless loop of shallow assignments, busy work, and nothing more. I just wanted to get through the day to work on videos, because I knew that in a few years I wouldn't be in school anyway. In hindsight, I'm not sure if that was the right decision, and without knowing where I'd be if I didn't focus on YouTube, I probably never will. Unlike in Deltarune, I can't go back on a new save file to see alternate lines of dialogue. Playing the game again was like looking into a mirror back to my past self. It wasn't really that long ago. Physically, I look about the same. My personality hasn't really changed. Hell, my priorities haven't really changed. But now that I'm 18 instead of 14, not in school anymore, it's now impossible to miss the nostalgic feelings from both the music and premise of creative kids going on adventures. The Deltarune world has so much joy and whimsy and creativity that I used to have. It's like when you go back and watch SpongeBob years later and realize you resonate with Squidward more than that little sponge. Graduating high school kinda fucked me up, not because everything changed, but because nothing did. It was only with hindsight that I realized I was already completely disconnected with school for years before I was out. And by seeing myself as above the system, I failed to make actual connections with the people around me. I had high school friends, but that's all they really were. Toby Fox has a tendency to create games with very cozy characters, his stories with a cozy atmosphere. There's a level of sincerity that comes with his work that's hard to get from anywhere else. The characters have personalities, but so do the descriptions, the world, the items, and even the very premise the games are built on. There's a level of love poured into these games that can't be found anywhere else. I'd like to imagine a big reason his games don't cost much is because people get so attached to his characters that they'll be naturally predisposed to buying them in the form of merchandise. Exploring its world again reconnected me with the wonder and curiosity of childhood adventure. It was an absolute blast through and through. But then, when I finally finished it, I felt sad. I was back to where I was when I first finished Chapter 2. Back to waiting to see more of these characters I've grown attached to. Ralsei is a character I liked 4 years ago, but he only grew more relatable on revisiting. The lonely Prince of Darkness, finally experiencing friendship, the joys, the pain, the highs, the lows. Even with his existential anxiety about not having a presence in the light world, it's still a pretty heartwarming story. Even if it were to end terribly, if that broken part of the prophecy he was worried about is in fact the worst thing ever, it's still better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. Ralsei could act as an analog for online friends, someone you only see on the computer, yet that doesn't make the friendship any less real. I think it's pretty easy to draw parallels between the Dark World and its denizens, like Ralsei and Lancer, and apply them to Deltarune as a piece of fiction. The Darkners aren't real in the same way the characters in the rest of the game aren't real. While in the Dark World, Lancer is a lovable, squishy little pumpkin of a boy, in the Light World, he's a playing card. A seemingly inanimate object only appearing as himself in the Dark World, which itself bears a striking resemblance to a child's imagination. It's easy to see Ralsei almost as an imaginary friend, Someone to fill the void left behind by someone who used to be very prevalent in Chris's life, only to go down his own path. In the Lightworld section of Chapter 4, Susie confuses a picture of Asriel for a depiction of Ralsei, before Chris highlights every difference between the two and why they're actually not alike at all. In this interpretation, even with this wishful thinking and active imagination, Ralsei still can't serve as a replacement, because no one can. Even with my high school experience in mind, I don't consider myself a particularly lonely person. I'm lucky enough to have formed a few really close friendships that I'm incredibly thankful for, many of which began online. But I still can't help but find Ralsei's character painfully relatable. I've made it to an age where schedule differences are constant. I'm no longer guaranteed to see anyone unless I reach out to them personally and make plans first. Any sort of consistent communication isn't guaranteed unless you make the effort to match schedules and work for it. A chapter earlier, we can see Ralsei coping with not being real, or not having a real presence in the light world, and can see other characters reassuring him. Even if he can't fulfill all the responsibilities of being a friend, he still is. And that's okay. Something it's taken him the entire game to find out is that friendship doesn't have to be an equal transaction. Up until the end of Chapter 4, Ralsei is burdened with being the only one to know the full extent of the prophecy, and he refuses to let the others help him through it because he's afraid he'd be burdening them with his problems. Being a friend is more than just being a friendly face. It's being there for people, and letting others be there for you. Sadly, the Goat Boy doesn't actually exist in our realm. There's no one to reassure because none of these characters are real. The ones that really need assuring, the fans who've grown attached, are never going to receive it. Unless they buy a plushie. With this in mind, it got me curious. If this is my perspective on Deltarune after only 4 years of ruminating on it, then what would I have to say about Undertale? As of recording, it's been an entire decade since Undertale's release, and people deeper within the fandom have had plenty of time to grow attached to the characters. I was very late to the Undertale train, but through the power of spending too much time online, I was able to look into it. After going back from Deltarune, there's something about returning to Undertale's world that feels so alienating. The Underground isn't a place Frisk chooses to enter. It's a place they literally fall into. You are a stranger to the Underground, and it gives the impression that the world itself is hostile, primed to be against you. Despite being invited in, that little house in the ruins could never really be a home. The only comforting thing the world of Undertale has are the friendly faces of its colorful cast. They're the only moments where you can let your guard down. You latch onto them because they give you this comfortable status quo, a group of friends in an otherwise grim world. The only time things start to feel better is after you've already befriended the cast, but the world itself always seems to be against you. Much like how it relates to the monsters, the Underground is ultimately a prison you're trapped in, even if those inside try to make the most of it. Deltarune isn't like this. The world itself is a lot more inviting. While in Chapter 1, Chris and Susie enter it under similar circumstances, the Dark World feels a lot more lighthearted. While the monsters in Undertale can be reasoned with and spared, the enemies in Deltarune, at least in the first 3 chapters, almost never actually want to fight you. And even when they do, they're still friendly about it. Like in Noelle's first encounter with Viro-kun, you both stop the fight to casually explain what's going on. This isn't the action of someone who wants you dead. In Chapter 3, you fight Lenino and Elnina, but there it's just for the game show, to create conflict. While in Undertale you attach to the characters, in Deltarune you also attach to the worlds they inhabit. And even though you can never go back to a dark world after the fountain's closed, the new friends you bring along will always keep the memory of your adventures alive. Your actions make a difference. The harsh world of Undertale makes you rely on its characters all the more. Why do we feel attached to fictional characters? How can I mourn the loss of someone who never existed to begin with? Mufasa's death in The Lion King traumatized a generation. He's generally agreed to be one of the best dads in any Disney movie. Caring, yet courageous. He loses his temper at points, but it's always clear that he only has Simba's best interests in mind. A lot of kids grew up with the movie, and were likely able to relate to Simba's character, which makes the sudden death of his father all the more gut-wrenching.
Disney's world of make-believe is drawing some criticism for its realism. In one scene, King Mufasa dies violently in a stampede.
Up until that point in the story, it mainly consisted of simple fun, the more childish tone in line with who Simba was. It wasn't without stakes, but it was more lighthearted. It was uncomfortable for many watching the movie. I remember I was about 5 when I first watched it, and my parents had to stop the movie because I was crying my eyes out. But when I look back at it today, if I could make the choice between keeping it as is or changing it to make people more comfortable, I wouldn't change a thing. Art is supposed to make you a bit uncomfortable. There isn't anything wrong with being emotionally invested in the stories of fictional characters. It can get unhealthy when you take it too far, but if people didn't connect with fiction, people wouldn't write it. And something you may not know is that, on a subconscious level, connecting with a fictional character can sometimes be more real than you might think. Game of Thrones is a series notable for its character depth and its character deaths. In a Florida State University study using characters from the series, it was determined that attachment to fictional characters is done in a comparable way to how we connect with real people. The study revealed that, in general, people were consistent in the traits they assigned. It also found that people were more likely to rate characters whose traits were similar to their own. On 7 of the 9 traits, there was significant evidence people were projecting their personality onto the characters. The characters in Undertale give the impression that they're real people, living real lives with their own personal struggles. This perceived depth makes it a lot easier to resonate with them. The main villain of Undertale is Flowey. Flowey is a perfect inversion of Ralsei. He's this butchered, deformed version of Asriel who lacks the capacity to feel or understand love and compassion. Even with the human souls powering him up, he never truly has his own. Ralsei, on the other hand, suffers the exact opposite dilemma. He's a being of love and compassion, yet doesn't have the physical presence to exercise his will outside of his own realm. Flowey is someone who's basically in the same situation as the player, someone who gained the ability to save and reset. So attached to the world of Undertale that they wanted to explore every possibility, sparing everyone, killing everyone, just to see what would happen, to squeeze more content out of something they love. This is a situation that everyone who played Undertale will experience. Asriel's primary motivation is insecurity, a fear of being abandoned. He's terrified at the prospect of the player giving up and moving on with their life because that means you'll be spending less time with him. In your various battles with him, even in cases where he gets virtually limitless power, all he ever seems to want is to keep fighting you forever, to draw out your playtime for as long as possible, even when it's impossible for him to kill you. When you fight him in the true pacifist route, he's just left begging you to die so he can keep everyone together for just a little bit longer. But at some point, everything has to come to an end. After you beat him in that route, you get access to the entire world for one last time, and can read basically every character in the game give new dialogue talking about their impending freedom, new content for the player. After that, you can leave and have the most satisfying ending, seeing all the characters we've grown so attached to by now, enjoying their best lives on the surface. But the option's always there. You can go back. If you return to your old save file, the game is silently calling you out. What used to be a lively menu with all your friends is empty. Everyone's already moved on. Everyone but you. It really goes full circle when you talk to Asriel enough times, all the way back at the flower bed at the beginning of the game, after you've already had the chance to see every other piece of dialogue. He asks, "Don't you have anything better to do?" By this point, he's able to move on, and you're the new Flowey. Toby's fans have a tendency to grab onto every little thing he says. Him and the community tend to be reflective of each other. Between chapters 2 and 3 of Deltarune, while everyone was slowly losing their minds waiting for new content, they randomly began editing some random tweet he made to give it new meanings, and it was hilarious. Fast forward to chapter 4's release, and you encounter a frightening pumpkin creature in the dark named Jackenstein. And you might notice that the humor is uncannily similar, the joke expanding and being reiterated upon over the course of the fight in the exact same way. The fan reaction was exactly as you'd expect. They stuck to it like barnacles on the bottom of a ship. They'll probably keep repeating the joke for the next year, until chapter 5 comes out. unable to let go until something new comes along. The best ending for Undertale is an ending in which you leave the game and its world forever after completing the true pacifist route. But you couldn't do that. The fans couldn't do that. Undertale's worlds, no, its characters, are so joyful it's intoxicating. So they replay the game a few more times. Then turn to fan content, consume fan fiction, play fan games. Undertale's prison of a world, they want to be trapped in by choice. On February 27th, 2018, months before the surprise release of Deltarune, someone posted the following to the r/depression subreddit, getting overly attached to fictional characters. The post details the user's dependency on escapism, in this case, a fictional relationship, and how they react when that fictional connection falls apart. My stomach's in knots, my chest aches, my whole body feels on fire. I'm experiencing what I can only conclude is extreme disappointment. The comments are filled with similar experiences from others. I watch and read a lot of anime and manga series. Let me tell ya, I get attached to characters so easily. I just want to jump into their world. In the film Peter Pan, Neverland is the world for kids who never grow up. A land where they can go on zany, whimsical adventures, meeting mermaids, and fighting Captain Hook and his crew.
Neverland? You'll never grow up there.
A dark world in Deltarune functions as a sort of Neverland, a place of escapism that you could leave whenever you want, but one you can also spend endless hours fully exploring. Deltarune's themes of escapism even go down to its very worlds and their antagonists. King and the people of Card Kingdom are all cards, chips, and checkers, different games used to pass the time. Queen is a laptop, and Cyberworld is the internet. If there's any place for escapism, I think it'd be the World Wide Web. Antenna is a television, quite literally an object of escapism. When life gets tough, you can always turn that little buddy on to be taken to another world, even just for a short time. The only one I'm not entirely certain about is Dark Sanctuary from Chapter 4. This could be seen as a turning point, going from hollow escapism to something more real. But in this reading, I'll just say that church is an escape from your sins. You turn to a higher power for comfort that the life you're living isn't without value. In all of these chapters, you're going to a place of escapism. Different people seek out comfort in different ways. For some, it's as high concept as religion, but for others, it can be as simple as a game or a TV show. Comfort media is something most people probably have, even if they don't realize it. I alluded to it earlier, but one of my favorite shows growing up was SpongeBob SquarePants. On revisiting it, I was surprised to see that it was even better than I expected. The classic episodes are classics for a reason, an uncountable number of iconic moments packed into an 11-minute time frame. But the things that make SpongeBob such a great comfort show isn't in its writing, but in its world and characters. SpongeBob SquarePants is an episodic show. That means Bikini Bottom is both always yet never changing. New locations and changes happen constantly, yet it's always able to function as a safe space. This episodic format also means the characters stay in place. Some could say that damages aspects of the show. Classic episodes like Band Geeks might lose some of their punch when Squidward has to be reset to his pessimistic self in the next episode. But the fact he's always negative makes him predictable, and there's a sense of comfort in that. Even today, looking at newer episodes, the characters are still pretty consistent. Good characterization gives you a good idea on not just a character's traits, but their mannerisms. If you as an audience member can guess how a character will react to something, that speaks wonders of how that character was communicated to the audience. To me, it's no surprise that Undertale has a nearly unprecedented amount of fanfiction. Its meta use of timelines played a factor in that, but even still, it would be nothing without its rogues gallery of characters. While a fandom's representation of a character is never 100% accurate, the fact anyone can write a version of Sans and Papyrus shows how great their dynamic is, and how much of an impression they left on the audience. They're characterized so well that people have formed entire communities of their own, making series where they alter and deconstruct the different character dynamics through alternate universes, where something is fundamentally different. I've been using a few classic Disney movies as examples throughout this video, and that's because they're one of the few studios that can achieve a similar feeling I get with Deltarune. To many, the golden age of Disney functions well as comfort media. A lot of people who are now adults grew up with these movies, actively relating and connecting with the characters. Another thing they have in common is the questionable mentalities of those who get too attached. As mentioned previously, Undertale kinda makes fun of dedicated players for not being able to move on. The Disney equivalent of these sorts of fans would be Disney adults. People that place their childhood media on such a high pedestal to the point where it becomes uncomfortable to watch. Disney World is their dark world, their Neverland where they don't have to face reality. Ralsei isn't real, and Lancer isn't either. When you live in denial, you aren't really living, just a vessel used to consume. Stop using these characters to fill the void left behind by all your friends abandoning you for the slime, because ultimately all it's doing is reminding you of a point in your life you could never go back to. A part of me kinda resents Deltarune. It's one of my favorite games ever made, with an atmosphere that goes completely unrivaled. It's comfortable, and when it isn't, it's endearing, captivating, awesome, hilarious. But when I see moments that aren't even that important, the little things like Chris and Susie watching TV as they drift off to sleep, sitting back and truly just enjoying the moment. I've lived similar experiences, but something about the background music or the way it's written, it feels almost like a fond memory that's playing out in real time. I can't help but feel like it's something I'm lacking in my own life. After a certain point, it almost starts to feel a bit cruel to have this perfect world dangled in front of you, a world where your friends are always free to do things, one where new adventures and mysteries are popping up each and every day. It's a life you don't want to simulate, but actually genuinely live. This is probably a very relatable experience to any Toby Fox fan, but it's always a bit heartbreaking when new content drops. Because once again, you'll come back, get reconnected and re-immersed in this world, experience some of the best gaming of your life, and after a few days, you'll be back out of content, waiting for another year or 5 to be brought back into this dark world. There's a reason Deltarune fans have enough brainworms to come up with shit like Friend Inside Me. When there isn't enough of a supply of content, when the demand is ever expanding, people start ruminating and theorizing. I think the worst thing about Friend Inside Me is that the fan content that came out of it looks genuinely awesome. Funnily enough, it gives me the same impression as Deltarune itself, something I would love to experience that's just out of reach. But no matter how long you spend fixating on something, no matter how extensive the fan art is, eventually the well has to dry up and you have to move on. But what if you don't have to? What if you can indulge deeper and deeper into this parasocial fictional connection? What if there was a whole app designed to get you to do just that? Welcome to the real life Matrix. Character.AI is probably the most revolting thing you could find on the App Store. It's an entire platform designed to manipulate vulnerable kids into talking to AI instead of each other. The majority of you watching, if you've used this platform at all, likely just went on once, played around for a bit, then got off when the novelty wore off. Most characters just tend to repeat their pre-designed character traits ad infinitum, so it's easy to get bored. But I don't believe normal people are the main audience they're targeting. Imagine being a vulnerable kid with no friends, someone who uses escapism to cope with loneliness. Like any of the people from the Reddit post from earlier. Maybe they find kinship in fiction, a friendly face like Ralsei. Before, you could play the game, consume some fan art, and maybe buy a plushie. But now, there's an option to never have that experience of running out of content. Now, there's the option to let it take over your life. To surround yourself with every one of your favorite characters every second of the day, a matrix of your own making. Like Disney World to Disney adults, it's their own personal Neverland, where they'll never have to leave their comfort characters behind. This is the target audience of Character.AI. Raw users aren't what they're after, they're looking for addicts. People willing to pay $13 a month for Character.AI Plus just for slightly higher quality conversations. Online, you can find an uncountable number of posts users have made chronicling their addictions, their growing attachment for people who aren't. When people are unhealthy towards something, there will always be someone to capitalize on it. It isn't Character.AI's fault these people are mentally unwell, it's their fault for placating and encouraging them. The sort of origin story for this video came from when I spent a full year making a video about parasocial relationships. I consider it my magnum opus. There's a brief side tangent I go on about being attached to fictional characters, citing an alleged story of fans weeping in the streets after the death of Sherlock Holmes. The story is dubiously sourced, likely exaggerated by the author's son, but that doesn't really matter, because I've seen that story play out before, time and time again. People growing attached, maybe too attached, and the negative consequences that follow. This is to say, I've spent a long time researching this sort of phenomenon. I know my shit. For that video, I tried to educate while also acknowledging how easy it is to fall into this parasocial trap. Yet here, I still find myself resonating, sometimes too hard, to these characters. I'm not an idiot, I'm not being duped. Well, maybe I want to be duped. Maybe we all want to be. Comfort shows, comfort games, comfort media. I've never really been able to stand it. See, the problem with being comforted is that if you mellow in it long enough, you'll never want to leave. Escapism can be nice, but how long can you escape before you're forced to face reality? We can't stay in Neverland forever. In my eyes, it's always worth trying to experience things. Appreciating art is great, but appreciating life is better. At least, it's better than longing for a world that doesn't exist.